Well, today, everyone, I just want to thank you for visiting my channel. It's Literacy Journeys with Linda. And today I have a wonderful guest here, Ruth Ezell. I know she's the award-winning senior producer of the Nine Network in St. Louis. And maybe, Ruth, you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I have been living in St. Louis since 1992. I moved here for a job at KSDK. Channel 5, and I was there for 10 years as a general assignment reporter and weekend anchor, and I departed from there after 10 years, did some work for several years at KMOX, and co-hosted a Saturday morning show, and then I joined Channel 9, which went from being changes. So now we are Nine PBS is our official brand. And since 2004, I am a founding producer of Living St. Louis. Yeah. And it has been really the best experience of my media career. We get to do with depth. You know, in general assignment reporting, it's kind of like you run and gun and you go and you get whatever's important for that day, and you rarely have time to really dig into a subject.
Yes.
Unless your bosses say you can do that, but more often than not, they need you on the street feeding that news machine that just goes 24/7 sometimes.
Well, it sounds very fast paced normally, but the Living St. Louis segment allows you to take a little bit more time.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah, I bet you enjoy that. Well, you've enjoyed great success in your journalism career, your broadcasting career, and none of that would have happened in a vacuum. I want to go back to a little bit about your foundations, because I know you're passionate about education and young people and literacy, and I just want to hear a little bit about that journey, like what kind of home environment did you have that enhanced your literacy, your education?
Well, in my case, at least, the home environment was everything. It was the foundation for everything that happens, because really, when you think about it, our first teachers are our parents. And most often than not, it's what you learn from them that lasts a lifetime.
Yes.
And my parents were always big readers.
Oh.
And just growing up, what you find is with kids, they tend to like to do what their parents do. They tend to emulate what their parents do.
Yes.
And so reading was very natural for them. And we had a home library.
Oh, great.
What is now, of course, now everybody uses Wikipedia if they look something up. Well, back in the day, way back in the day, it was the Encyclopedia Britannica, which...
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, you know that. And, maybe, depending on the family budget, you could update it, every however so often they had new installments coming out. But that was just one small part of a big family home library that included novels, that included a lot of Black history books. And that's really, I learned my Black history from my parents, between the oral history that is widespread in the African American community, and a lot of books that were written about Black American history that you just don't get in school. It really gave me a very strong sense of self. I mean, as a family member, as a member of a larger community.
Yes.
Now, in the days when newspapers reigned in terms of journalism, we actually had 4 newspaper subscriptions.
Wow. Do you know the names of them?
The names of them were, and actually 3 of the 4 entities still exist. We got daily the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press, the Detroit Times. The Times no longer exist. It went out of business. Well, they kind of merged They were kind of bought out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Free Press and the News still exist, but they publish jointly on Sunday. So we had the News, of Free Press, the Times, the Michigan Chronicle. You must have your African-American weekly newspaper, one of the oldest in the country, not the oldest. And then we had Look and Life magazines.
Yeah.
And National Geographic. And then whatever suited my mother's fancy that she saw at the checkout counter at the grocery store.
Like Ebony or Jet magazine.
Absolutely. That's right. Oh, that's right. We had an Ebony subscription. We had a Jet magazine subscription. Thank you for reminding me. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, most African-American homes had those. And me being from Chicago, I had the Chicago Defender.
Defender. Yes, I lived in Chicago for several years. Had to have my Defender every week.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So these were the foundation. You were surrounded by all this literature. And I bet you saw your parents reading the newspaper.
And it was not something they had to tell us to do, because it was there and kids are curious and they want to learn. And of course, when you're really little, you start off just kind of like focusing on the comics and the photos. But then you want to understand more about what those photos mean. So you start reading the article as you start building your vocabulary. And so that's kind of how you learn. So by the time my three brothers and I started school, our reading level, I mean, we all went into kindergarten with reading skills. By the time we were at the first grade, we were at least 2 grade levels above, at least, in terms of our reading. And one of the things I learned, and I don't know, this all kind of happened organically.
Yes.
But, and this just could be from so much reading at home, I always understood that words were components of thoughts. So, you know, when they would call on you to read out loud, especially in elementary school, and they would go around the room and, you know, I'd sit there and, you know, as my classmates would read sentences, one word at a time. And it was, you know, it was a process and it took a long time. But when I got up, I would always look at the sentence as an entire thought and just read it.
Very fluently.
So, yeah. And that's not something anybody taught me to do. It's just, you know, being a kid of the TV era, maybe that's part of it too. You know, you listen to TV, you listen to radio, people talk in sentences. They don't talk in words unless the sentence is stop.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that sounds like a wonderful foundation. So when you're younger, you read to learn. But then as you get older, you start reading for yourself for a different reason. How do you find your reading? How do you relate to reading today at this season of your life and as you were growing up? How did your reading evolve?
Well, I find as a reader, you have different needs. I mean, there is reading that you do to be informed. There is reading you do to be entertained. And I guess those are the 2 main categories. I read nonfiction, even though it's informational. I'll read nonfiction biographies. They're informative, but they're also very entertaining.
Yes.
So I love to read about famous people and successful people, really. And how they got to be where they are. It's always been a passion of mine.
Yes, I do the same thing. I love that genre, biographies and memoirs. Yeah, they're very eye-opening because you get to peek into another person's life and just think, wow, you know, it's really great. Can you imagine, Ruth, what your life would be without your literacy? Can you imagine that? What would you be doing? And the reason I say that is I grew up with an illiterate grandmother. I had a grandmother who couldn't read or write, add or subtract. And then my other grandmother who read all the time, like the Ebony and Jet, her life was completely different. And so, wow, what would your life be like? I imagine it's very valuable to you, your literacy.
Oh, very much so. This sounds like a platitude, but when they say reading is fundamental, it's really true. And it's a window to the world. You know, with good books, you can travel the world from your armchair.
Wow.
So yeah, I can't even imagine what I'd be doing, because what I'm doing now is all based on words and storytelling. So yeah, that's one of the ways I identify myself, is as a storyteller. So yeah, it would be a very confining existence, a very limiting existence, I think, if I didn't have
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's so important for people like you and me to get this message out about how important it is. And I just want to go back to what you were saying about the environment of your home. We've got a lot of kids at home now, of course, with their parents in this pandemic season. And hopefully they are observing their parents reading, or their materials in the home, so that they can catch on to reading. And
Yeah. I'm really concerned. I've seen so many stories on the news where parents are frustrated. They don't know what to do with their kids. And it's like, I don't get that. I just don't get that. Now, granted, the libraries are closed, and that is a big problem.
Okay.
But, you can, there must be somebody, you can borrow a book from, or, I mean, reading is available. If you have a computer, I know a lot of people, are victims of the digital divide.
Yes.
But I think resourcefulness can really help. I think people are so worried right now about what they cannot do, instead of focusing on what you can do, and how, because the world's not going to ever be the same. Yeah. Even when we go back to normal, in quotes, there will be permanent changes. I'm working from my dining room table at the moment. And I'm sure when we open up our station, because even though we're an essential business, our boss, in her infinite wisdom, said, we're just shutting the building down. Everybody's leaving because I want you all helping. Yeah. And you all work from home, and we'll just work this out. And so far it's working. So while it is important to, and I know I'm getting off topic. I'm sorry about this.
No.
But you adjust. And so I see that new normal is maybe I'll work from home a couple days a week, and then, meet with my colleagues in person, touch base with them, because that just kind of does something to nurture
personal connection. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very important. And, if this isn't a time for personal enrichment, I don't know what is.
Absolutely. It's kind of a gift in some senses, having this time off.
Absolutely. For me, it's like glass half full. And I think that's how, I think people feel a lot better if they start, kind of looking at their situation that way. But don't complain about what you can't change.
Right.
And do the best with what you can, and doing things differently. And yeah, in fact, it's so funny. I still have to struggle for time to do my own reading, because one of the disadvantages of working from home, there are certain things you want to get done, and I don't want to get distracted. And I have to say, okay, this is my time. This is my reading time, my personal reading time. And it's really funny, because trying to juggle all that, but it's a learning experience.
Right. And I find that there's just so many things competing for our attention. It's just so easy to just plop down on the couch and do your binge watch, and that's fine. I do that, and then my book on my book stand kind of gets ignored. Like, no, let me turn on. I want to see that. So we just have so many options today than when we had decades ago, and parents do too. With the electronic, the e-readers, and
Kindle and stuff like that. Yeah.
And the kids, the video games, and it's just so much competing for our time today. But I still say that reading, that literacy, that's the powerhouse. That's the powerhouse. That's the
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. You still need to know how to spell halfway decently and read to exchange text messages. So.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Even that. And I know that Channel 9, that 9 network, what did you say the new branding is? 9 PBS?
9 PBS.
9 PBS has lots of resources for parents, for parents to educate their children at home. And so that's great that you all are helping. You're in a helping mode. And I just want to think that, speaking of helping, we don't hear about this issue, illiteracy, on the news every day. But there are lots of people out there like my grandmother. And do you have any thoughts about how we can help people who are struggling readers? I know.
I worry mostly about adults. I remember I worked in, as I told you, in Chicago for several years, at the CBS station there. And the writers, I was a unionized writer at the time, and we were on strike. And I remember us, going through the picket lines, and the technicians, were in support of us. And what they would do, they could not honor our picket line. I mean, they had to go into work.
Okay.
Because they were a separate union. But what they would do, they would, come 10 minutes before work and walk around with us in solidarity and then go inside.
I see.
And there was this one guy who he was asked to do something that required that he read or write, sign a petition or something. And there was something in his response. Anyway, he ended up not doing what it was we needed him to do when he went inside. And one of my colleagues said, you know what? I think he's functionally illiterate. And we all kind of looked at each other and said, yeah, there are a lot of adults that can't read. They're somehow making their way through life.
They are.
And I remember also, now that I'm thinking about it, I remember when before there was a lot of online shopping, when you had to call if you wanted to have something mailed to you.
Okay.
So I called this vitamin store, and you could only get their stuff through the mail.
Okay.
And I'm talking to the customer service person, and I'm telling them what I want, and they're repeating it and everything else. Well, the package is completely different. And I thought, this is really odd. So, I called up customer service, and I got a supervisor on the phone, and I said, look, I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I'm going to go ahead and return this. This is what I really wanted. I said, you might want to ask this guy, because I don't think he wrote anything down that I said. I think he repeated it and tried to remember it. So, and I could be absolutely wrong, but when you start, if you pay attention, there's a stunning number of people who don't read that well and can't write at all.
That's true.
It's scary.
And this is one of my purposes. I just wanted to my mission is to get this message out that, just like you said, there are people, you use the word stunning amount, yes, that they're just in the shadows, or they're faking it till they make it. And we can reach out to them with people like you, who you're sharing your story of what reading has done for your life.
It's everything. It really is. It's a means just to make you more human. I mean, it's the one thing, we're the only creatures on earth that can do this. So
that's a good thought. Yeah. A squirrel reading a paper, yeah.
That's a cute little image. Now it's going to show up in a commercial somewhere.
No. Yeah. Well, Ruth, thank you so much for sharing with our audience how much reading has done for your life. I really, really appreciate it, and for going on this literacy journey with me. And I wish you success to keep doing what you're doing. Keep the Living St. Louis program going. That is really great. I looked at the segment the other day about the woman who's combining literacy and workshop.
Yes.
Lit shop or whatever she called it. It's fantastic, helping these young girls not only do their workshop and read books. We need to hear about those stories. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
And thank you so much for your work, and keep it up. And if you need me back, you know where to find me.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Ruth.
Take care.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.